All right. Okay, so stop writing that fish. I know, I'm bad at naming things, but this is a reference to this talk from Brett Victor. Stop drawing that fish. In his talk, Brett starts by drawing a fish on his computer, something like this. And for a moment, nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, still nothing happened. So, fish, when they are alive, they move. They don't stay as static as this. So then he shows another representation of a fish. One made for a computer. You can see him interacting with the fish in real time, and the fish responding to his action. So now, if we go back to the drawing of a fish, like this, maybe if you print it on paper, it is a good representation of a fish, but on a computer, this feels lifeless. On a computer, this is a good representation of a dead fish. So the thing is, this is an example of how we are using computers to emulate all media. This is an example of how we are using like the computer to emulate the drawing of a fish on a canvas. And another example, perhaps more relevant to this conference, is websites. Many websites don't look very different from printed media like books or magazines. In many cases, we are basically using the web as a magazine emulator. So let me tell you the story of one blog post. That's me. I used to have a hat. No. Now Aris found a new one for me. Thank you, Aris. So I published this on 2017 when everyone was blogging on Medium. And it's a post about how to build your own mini React. And it's the typical tutorial where you build something step by step. And it has the typical layout that you see everywhere on Medium, on many blogs, or almost everywhere on the content website. And I think this layout is a bad fit for the content. Like, the first problem is that in this post we have two things, like code and explanation, going in parallel. And this layout, in this layout, everything is in sequence, like one thing after the other. The other problem is with the code. The code changes step by step. It's the same code that is dynamic. It changes. But here, in this layout, everything is static. So after I published this, like for the next 2 years, I had those two problems on the back of my mind. And during that time, I worked on a couple of projects. One is Code Surfer, which is a tool for presenting code, presentations. Another one was Git History, which is another tool. This one is for visualizing the history of a file on a Git repository. Then in 2019, people started to moving away from Medium. Self-hosting your blog became popular again. So I wanted to self-host my blog post. And I published a new version of the blog using the work from the other projects. And it looked like this. Okay, so now we have like the code on the left, the explanations on the right, and the code changes in place. So it's easier to follow. Well, maybe not at this speed, but believe me, it's easier to follow. And this version of the post that had a much better reception than the other one, man, like more views, better feedback, and people still like share it and visit it today. Like it's from 3 years ago, and people still visit it. So if you want to, or if you publish content to the web, and you want to make it more dynamic, you will have two problems. One is that there aren't many like UI patterns or like guidelines to take as a reference. And the other is that there are few tools to make that type of content. And here I'm talking about content related to programming, because in other areas like data visualization, for example, you have like well-established tools and patterns. But I think like things are starting to improve in programming content as well. And now I will show you some patterns that are starting to emerge and some tools to build them. So one pattern is the interactive widget. You see them in some blogs that they have some interactive widget along the text, and it allows the reader to explore something at their own pace. And something similar is, or perhaps a more extreme version of this, is live code editors. When you give the reader a piece of code and they can edit it and see the results. And it's similar to the interactive widgets in a way the reader can explore something. Here, the reader will have more freedom to explore, but also less guidance from the author, so it's a trade-off. Then we have tabs. Tabs like feel basic and obvious, but not many websites that shows code use tabs. And tabs follow a more general technique called details on demand, where you only show some certain information when the user asks for it. Another version of this is this pattern that I call Spotlight, where instead of changing the file you're showing, you like focus on a different part of the code when the user hovers or clicks something. And another pattern is scrollytelling, which is when you use the scroll position to control what you show to the reader. In this case, we are seeing the stripe dots, and the other is a tutorial from Apple. And usually you change when the position of the scroll changes, you show a different code or a different demo to the reader. And what happened here? So I've been talking about making things more dynamic, but the reader may prefer a static version of the content too. I prefer or may need. So a good practice is to provide a fallback. Like, for example, here Stripe has a link to a static version of the tutorial, and the Apple tutorial has like a breakpoint where it shows a static version of the content for smaller screens. Drink some water. Okay, let's see some tools. So like almost everyone uses Markdown to write technical content. And MDX is like an extension to Markdown where you can import components. So this is very useful for interactive widgets. You just import a component and put it along the text. And it also can be used like to pass Markdown to components. And this is a very powerful technique. I have an entire talk on this topic. You can search DX in MDX. Not now, but it's there. And then we have for live editors, we have two great options, two great tools. One is Sandpack from the Code Sandbox team, and the other is the JavaScript SDK from StackBlitz. Sandpack is more flexible. Let you do more things, but the StackBlitz SDK like can run more things. I think like the last time I checked, for example, I think you can't run an Next.js app inside Sandpack, but you can do it with the JavaScript SDK from StackBlitz. And another amazing tool is Code Hike. A little disclaimer: I'm the author of this one, but you can pass. You can use the technique in the MDX that you can pass Markdown. In this case, we are passing two code blocks in Markdown to the code component, and Code Hike is rendering the thing in tabs. Like, you can use the same idea with the Spotlight component. You can pass a bunch of steps in Markdown, and Code Hike will show something like that. And the same for the storytelling pattern. You pass some steps in Markdown, and you automatically have that storytelling layout, which also have the static fallback with a media query. You can pass any media query, and it will fall back to a static version of the same content. And it comes with default styling, but you can customize it with CSS. In this case, this is a clone I made from the stripe dots, and it's using Code Hike. It's mostly MDX and CSS. Okay, so to recap, the web is a very powerful medium, and many websites are not taking advantage of it. So we've seen some websites that are going in the right direction, and we've seen some tools that can help you build that kind of content. So what can you do if you write content for the web? Remember that these tools and patterns exist, and there are more, not just this. And remember that you can provide a different reader experience without sacrificing the authoring experience. And there's also a lot of space for innovation here. So you can also help create and explore new patterns and tools. I'm starting a new Discord server, maybe a newsletter at codesplainers.com. It's brand new. Even if you go now, probably the first one to join. There's no one there. And if you use Twitter, I'm Pomber there, or I Pomber everywhere else in the internet. And that's all. Muchas gracias.